Listen closely not just to what's being said here, but to how it's being framed. This floor speech isn't just an argument about funding. It's a battle over narrative, trust, and who gets to define care in America. And buried inside the emotion are assumptions, omissions, and power plays most viewers will never notice. Let's break it down. At first glance, this speech presents itself as a moral warning. The speaker paints a vivid, emotionally charged picture of a vulnerable young woman, fearful, unsure, searching for help, and then walks the audience step by step into what is described as a deceptive trap. This storytelling isn't accidental, it's strategic. Notice how quickly the focus shifts from policy language, TANF funding, legislative procedure, to personalized fear. The listener is invited to emotionally identify with a hypothetical woman before any detailed policy debate begins. Once that emotional foundation is laid, everything that follows is filtered through it. Question worth asking: is this speech primarily arguing policy outcomes, or is it shaping moral alignment before facts are fully examined?
Gentleman reserves, the gentlelady from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, as families across the country are being crushed by rising costs and stripped of their health care, it's shameful that Republicans have chosen to bring a bill to the floor that does nothing to address these crises for pregnant women and families. Instead, the bill before us today would allow temporary assistance for needy family, or TANF dollars, to be used to fund so-called crisis pregnancy centers that have a proven track record of intentionally lying to, misleading, and endangering women. And it is no coincidence that this bill is being rushed to the floor this week as Republicans once again prioritize appeasing a national anti-abortion group in town for its annual rally instead of addressing the real crises facing American families. I want to paint a picture as to what happens to a young woman who suspects that she may be pregnant. She has a mix of emotions. She may have overwhelming fear and anxiety, especially if she has few resources. So she goes to what she thinks is a medical center or clinic, and it's called a pregnancy center of some sort. When she gets there, she's greeted so warmly with open arms. There are people in white coats who she assumes are medical professionals. They tell her she can get so many things for free: pregnancy tests, ultrasounds, pregnancy counseling, and after the birth, even free diapers and formula. It all sounds so wonderful to this woman that she says, "Sign me up." But they don't tell this woman that in order to get these free services, she has to first sit through an ideological or religious indoctrination session in which all the reasons to not have an abortion are given. They don't tell her that the person administering the ultrasound has no medical credential, and in fact, this is not an official ultrasound, and she could be misdiagnosed. They don't tell her that half the personnel in the so-called clinic have no medical credential at all, and therefore are not equipped to advise on any medical complications such as an ectopic pregnancy. They don't tell her that this is not a medical clinic at all. In fact, because it is not, this woman's privacy is not protected, and her information could be shared with the public. The real world of the crisis pregnancy centers is exemplified by an OBGYN in Iowa who's seen patients who visited these centers and were told that using contraceptives was the same as having an abortion. She's seen patients who suffered miscarriages and ectopic pregnancies because they were misdiagnosed by these anti-abortion centers. These women were told that their pregnancies were in the early stages or that they were experiencing normal amounts of pain because these staff members that they saw were not actual qualified medical professionals. As a result, these women ended up in the hospital needing emergency care and surgery to save their lives. In Illinois, a woman seeking an abortion was deliberately misled by a fake clinic. She was subjected to graphic videos told that having an abortion would make her infertile and ultimately mentally ill, and ultimately she was coerced into carrying a pregnancy to term. After giving birth, she lost her job and health coverage, and the so-called clinic never offered real medical care or follow-up support.
Words like so-called clinics, fake, sham, deceptive, and indoctrination appear repeatedly. These are not neutral descriptors. They function as framing devices, signaling to the audience how they should interpret these centers before any regulatory distinctions are discussed. At the same time, the speech draws a sharp contrast between medical authority and ideological motive, white coats versus credentials, care versus coercion. But there's an important nuance here. The argument assumes uniformity among all crisis pregnancy centers, without acknowledging variation in oversight, staffing, or services. When complex systems are described as monolithic, nuance often disappears, and so does space for disagreement. The speaker cites doctors' accounts, professional organizations, and anecdotal cases involving harm. These examples are powerful, but they're also selective. What we don't hear are any acknowledgement of women who report positive experiences, any distinction between regulated and unregulated centers, any discussion of existing state-level oversight mechanisms. This doesn't invalidate the concerns raised, but it does narrow the lens through which the audience is asked to view the issue. Now here is the question: does highlighting the worst-case scenarios clarify the issue, or does it risk oversimplifying it? By the midpoint, the bill itself becomes symbolic rather than technical. It's framed not merely as legislation, but as evidence of political intent, appeasement, retaliation, and ideological warfare. The speech links this bill to national anti-abortion rallies, Trump-era political grievances, Medicaid cuts, broader health care failures. This layering widens the scope dramatically. The bill is no longer about TANF, it's about priorities. When one bill is made to carry the weight of many grievances, it becomes a stand-in for an entire political worldview.
And this is why the American Medical Association and the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists have raised serious ethical and medical concerns about these clinics. And now, Republicans want to guarantee that taxpayer dollars through these TANF funds will fund these centers and that there will be no accountability for these dollars. Now, let's first be clear what TANF is actually supposed to be for. TANF exists to help families experiencing poverty meet their most basic needs and stabilize their lives so parents can work and children can thrive. TANF was never intended to subsidize anti-abortion propaganda or unregulated sham clinics that endanger women's health. Yet that's exactly what this bill does. Not only that, it goes beyond the regular TANF program, which requires reporting and accountability. And actually, this bill says that nothing shall be construed to restrict TANF funding for these centers, meaning that funding could not be taken away from them even if this center engages in deceptive practices or even causes a woman's death. When the Ways and Means Committee marked up this bill last week, Democrats offered common sense amendments that should have been uncontroversial to anyone who cares about women and families. We simply propose that TANF funds not go to pregnancy centers that have engaged in deceptive or misleading practices, that provide medically inaccurate information, or that have endangered the health of a woman seeking care. We also offered amendments to address the real crisis affecting the TANF program, which is the Trump administration's decision to seek revenge against 5 Democratic governors by preventing them from accessing $10 billion in already appropriated funds for TANF and child care. And Republicans rejected every one of these amendments. Clearly, this bill is not about supporting pregnant women and families. It's about shielding deceptive actors, supporting Trump's revenge tactics, and using public funds to advance an extreme anti-abortion agenda.
Perhaps the most striking claim comes near the end, that funding could continue even if a center engages in deception or causes harm. This is the linchpin of the argument. But here, as the key question the speech does not fully unpack. Is this an unavoidable outcome of the bill's language or an interpretation of its worst possible application? That distinction matters enormously, yet it's left unresolved. This speech is meticulously constructed. It blends personal narrative, moral urgency, professional authority, and political accusation into a single arc designed to move both hearts and votes. Whether one agrees or disagrees with the conclusion, what's undeniable is this. The debate here is not just about funding pregnancy centers. It's about who defines care, who is trusted, and how fear and protection are politically mobilized. And the most important questions aren't shouted in this speech. They're the ones left quietly hanging afterward. That's where the real debate begins.
If Republicans truly cared about pregnant women and families, we would be debating how to undo their $1 trillion cut to Medicaid, which rips health care away from millions of pregnant women, new mothers, and children, and how to help the millions of women seeing their health insurance premiums skyrocket due to months of Republican inaction. Instead, this bill is merely an attempt to distract from these devastating realities with the ultimate goal of appeasing the anti-abortion advocates parading around Washington this week as countless women suffer and die under extreme Republican abortion bans. Their priorities are clear and profoundly misguided. I urge my colleagues to vote no. And Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlelady reserves. The gentleman from Missouri.
If you found this analysis helpful, you're welcome to subscribe. New videos here focus on understanding American politics beyond the noise. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.